Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
All right, Joe, we're near the finish line. Just one game to go in this 2025 season. And, no matter where your opinions on the value of the bowls this time of year and this current college football landscape, it's still pretty special to get that extra game and some extra practices as well. And especially a place that's as familiar to Sun Devil football as El Paso, Texas.
Yeah, I mean, college football is still good. Games are still good. Now, of course, it's not what it was 20 or so years ago when the Sun Bowl or the old Insight Bowl or those sort of things were, cause for some celebration, but we got to adjust with the times. Yeah, of course, ASU wraps up the 2025 season and wraps up the calendar year of 2025 against Duke in the Sun Belt, El Paso, Texas. A unique thing in a sense, Brad, that the 2025 season, and this has happened before, at least on one occasion, if I'm not mistaken, the 2025 calendar year begins and ends with Sun Devil football. New Year's Day college football playoff game against Texas to start the year, and a New Year's Eve game against Duke in the Sun Bowl to close things out.
Okay, that is something that I had not. That's some Sun Devil science right there. I like it.
I think the same happened in '97 with the Rose Bowl, and I think the Sun Bowl that year was on New Year's Eve as well of '97. So I'm not sure about the 86. I'm thinking about it. Obviously New Year's Day games that ASU's played in the past. So yeah, the 2025 calendar year bracketed by games of Sun Devil football.
We'll take it. Yeah, it's been an eventful year for the Devils for sure. Of course, starting off in Atlanta in the college football playoff, now coming to a close here on Wednesday. And then Friday, the transfer portal opens officially with all the madness to come there. We're going to be taking a look at this Peach Bowl matchup, or I would say, maybe that's some wishful thinking.
That'd be a lot better if it was. Yeah, right.
This Sun Bowl matchup against Duke, a rematch of the 2014 game, of course. We're going to be talking to Duke insider Anna Snyder a little bit later on. We're also going to be talking to a couple of young Sun Devils that are going to be probably taking some increased reps in Wednesday's game. Quarterback Cam Dyer, I know a lot of fans are really excited to see him in action for the first time as a Sun Devil. He'll be joining us a little bit later on. And then Derek Eusebio, ASU's wide receiver, earned all Big 12 honorable mention honors. We're talking about his breakout season. But Joe, before we dive into all that, some news. And first, the good news. This was one question that was kind of in the wind for a little bit. We finally got an answer, and it's music to Sun Devil fans' ears. Defensive tackle CJ Fight is running it back.
And that's a big one. ASU is going to lose a lot. I've been starting to crunch some numbers, and just by virtue of graduation and NFL draft entries and the ones that have at least made their names known for the transfer portal so far, ASU is going to be in a position to lose in excess of 80% of its total starts from 2025. That's a very big number. Of course, a polar opposite shift from everything we talked about in the offseason leading up to this year of ASU bringing back all of this talent and productivity and experience and starts. So that pendulum swings back and forth in college football. So reason I bring that up is CJ Fight is in line to be one of a very small few Sun Devils to return to this program with a great deal of starting experience as a whole, but especially in 2025 as well. So he's someone that certainly has an NFL future ahead of him, but a vital piece of the puzzle for ASU. So really, really important that you bring him back to this lineup. And I think it's the right decision as well, not just, tackling this from a selfish perspective of ASU loses a lot of guys, so let's bring as many guys back as possible. I think for him, it's the right move.
And also some good news on the personnel front this time in the coaching ranks. Former UCLA defensive backs coach Demetrice Martin, a.k.a. Coach Meat, a guy who's made a number of stops along the way, coaching up defensive backs, also a very skilled and noted recruiter in his own right. He is set to join ASU's staff. Now, when we talked about Kenny Dillingham getting his new deal and much of that new contract or amended contract, including new resources for the coaching staff, that also included kind of the front office personnel. So this could be something where his role has not yet officially been announced in terms of what he's actually going to be doing. But when you bring a guy into the mix that has as accomplished a resume as him and as a developer of young defensive backs, also is a skilled recruiter. Oh, he also happens to be the father of former ASU nickelback Cole Martin, who followed his dad to UCLA. Could he follow him to ASU for a second stint as a Sun Devil? Stay tuned.
Yeah. One thing, a couple things to unpack and point out about this. One that I think is most important is that this addition is not made to replace a coach. This is not, I think a lot of folks see this and know Martin's history with defensive backs and say, oh my goodness, is Brian Carrington getting poached by a bigger program? Is that's what's in the cards? And it certainly does not seem to be the case. This sounds like it likely will not be, a traditional coaching staff hire, maybe in an additional analyst type of role, but those can still be tremendously valuable hires. And we'll see how that whole thing unfolds. So I think at least, for the time being, don't let, for folks who are watching and listening, don't let your gut reaction be, okay, it's good to get this guy, but does that mean that we lost somebody else? Doesn't sound to be the case. Now, of course, and he's someone who's, he's getting those reward points from the old Pac-12, Pac-10 schools, because I think he's got at least half the old league under his belt, if I'm not mistaken. UCLA, he was at Arizona for a while, so on and so forth. But again, going to his son, Cole Martin, as we know, a former 4-star recruit who played high school football locally, began at Oregon, played here at ASU in 2024, wasn't healthy for a great deal of the season, missed virtually all of it due to injury, then opted to transfer to UCLA, where he played a lot and was among the team's top tacklers. But with his father relocating, of course, with UCLA changing head coaches and maybe other reasons as well, Cole Martin is already back in the transfer portal. That's not something that has to be waited for, or are we wondering, hey, now that his dad's relocating, is Cole going to enter the transfer portal? That part already happened. So I don't know if you can consider it like a foregone conclusion or a guarantee, but it seemed like he left on good terms, as is the case with pretty much all, or at least the overwhelming majority of transfers that have left under Kenny Dillingham. There isn't usually a lot of bad blood. We've seen all the positive tweets that Dillingham likes to do, when these players leave. So seems, at least on the surface, that the door could be open for a return. And this is not some roster lint that you're just taking the coach's kid. This is a talented player with some experience now who got healthy this year. And oh, by the way, ASU needs to replace a lot of guys in the secondary. And we saw last year how important a high-tiered nickelback can be, comparing what Shamari Simmons did in 2024 to what we saw this past year. So this could be a gift that gives in a few different ways.
Yeah, Cole Martin was very impactful for the Bruin defense this past season. He unfortunately battled injuries here, didn't make any game appearances for the Devils, but that door could be open. We've seen ASU be, as Ralph Amsden said, the best second choice you could possibly make, because perhaps that could be another chance for Cole Martin to come in and make an impact. But his father has certainly been a very successful coach throughout his time in college football, and so this could be a very good, nice pickup. And of course, as you mentioned, very key that Brian Carrington this isn't at his expense. He's still firmly entrenched, of course, to the great work he's done in developing ASU's corners, most notably Keith Abney as well. Now, talking on the flip side, some guys who are continuing to make their intentions known to enter the portal once it opens on Friday, January 2nd. Again, as we've seen kind of throughout the course of the early announcements, none of these guys are necessarily key contributors or guys that were in the two deep. Wide receiver Akeem Lanu was a transfer portal addition. Brought a 6'6", 6'7" frame, but worked all exclusively with the scout team so far this year. A defensive back, Adama Fall, is made his intentions known, and the one I think is the most recent, but one that I think could be, maybe perhaps similar to Zechariah Sample, is a young guy that has flashed in practice, but that I thought could perhaps once this veteran crop of guys moves on, could make an impact. Safety Chris Johnson, his father was an NFL player, had some good genes, and I thought was really in line to being an impactful player in 26. He's also announced his intention to enter the portal.
Yeah, they're the group of a few young defensive backs on this team, maybe guys that are like heading into their second or third year at the college level, that just haven't gotten a lot of playing time. And, after like that 2-year mark in the program for the same coach, maybe sometimes guys either see the writing on the wall or they start to feel like their clock's ticking and maybe they need a reset. And that could be, what's happening here. Now, obviously, as we talked about, ASU is going to lose a lot of defensive backs, but they, have recruited through the transfer portal and elsewhere some high quality ones as far as players that still have eligibility, and you'd assume that they're going to hit that pretty hard as well. So, again, as we've talked about, as you mentioned, the majority of the entries that are known so far are largely ones that just have not received a great deal of playing time. And this is one that falls into that category. So we'll see what the future holds, and if this is someone that can become a key contributor elsewhere, or if it's just a situation where ASU can move on and he can find the best opportunity for himself.
All right, so let's look at the latest news. But before we dive into our 2025 Sun Bowl preview, let's talk to one of the key young Sun Devil players that'll be making his debut in El Paso, quarterback Cam Dyer. All right, so prepping for the bowl game, Kenny said he's got some packages for you there. How excited are you to kind of have that collegiate debut coming up in a few weeks?
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. Just all glory to God, because this path wasn't easy. Getting here is it's really been tough. So now that I'm finally here and able to be in that position, I'm just excited.
How have you seen kind of your teammates maybe help you prepare for get that time in the spotlight?
Yeah, I feel like the team's been really supportive. Guys coming up to me around the facility just telling me like how better I've gotten each day. I just really pushed so hard for them because when I was down and out, they gave their all to me. So just feeling their support means the world to me.
And working with a guy like Jeff, who's been around the game for a little bit of time, what have been some of those impactful lessons that you picked up from Jeff?
Yeah, that's like my older brother. He's really just a guy that comes to work, and I admire that. He doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't brag and boast about himself, and I just really admire that. A guy that just, like I said, comes in ready to work, and is a really good leader and a really good guy to be around. So I take all of those lessons that he's given me and shown me, and just apply it to what I do.
When you look at this Duke defense, ACC champion level team, what kind of jumps out to you about some of the things that you'll be facing?
Yeah, they're a good defense. They play hard. They're well coached. I feel like, they know what they're doing. They're a pretty simple structure. And so, just knowing what we're doing is really important, and focusing on what we have to do is really important. And, I'm just ready to play some ball, to be honest.
You've faced obviously some adversity coming back from the injury. The offense overall has kind of faced adversity all throughout the course of the season with all the injuries there. How do you feel like all that, going those difficulties have maybe helped prepare you for next season and beyond?
Yeah, I feel like my whole career I faced adversity. I feel like that's the sport we play is, everything comes with the price, you know what I'm saying? And in order to keep what you want, you have to pay that price. And, like Xavier Alford always says, rent is due. And that's the choice. That's the truth. It couldn't be more true. You have to wake up every day and, chase what you want despite what happens. And really this season has taught me that. This game has taught me that, throughout my life. And so, really just doing what I do, staying true to my process, that's really, what I've been focused on.
What do you hope to show the coaching staff and Sun Devil fans when you get out there on the field?
Yeah, I just, I hope to be my best version of me. And, I think it's that simple. You know what I'm saying? I think I can't control the other things that happen outside of me. I can control what I can control. And, I know that the work that I put in will show.
With you being with the team for a little over a full calendar year, where have you seen yourself grow the most?
Yeah, I would say just my maturity. I feel like, I've always prided myself on being a guy that can lead, but knowing how to lead a locker room that's, a lot older and a lot more mature has forced me to mature as a young leader. I would say that's a big thing, and really just understanding things from different perspectives. I feel like that's a big thing. I came in, obviously only being from, Albuquerque, New Mexico, coming from a smaller place, I only had that perspective inside of me. And so, getting here with guys from all over, Texas, California, Florida, learning how different guys come to this place, and everybody, comes about from all walks of life, it's just been allowing me to grow as a person and as a leader.
How did you see those bonds just kind of help bring this team closer throughout the season?
Yeah, I feel like it's special here, man. And I feel like, really just the culture is a big thing. I feel like the culture allows us to be who we are and allows us to just naturally bond together and just come into as one. And it's really all props to, Coach Dilly, starts with him, and then everybody else, all the leaders, all the older guys who, set the culture here. And really just learning from them and really just buying into that family piece is really important.
When you look at the growth you had this year, how much of an impact has Jeff Sims had on you?
A lot, like I was telling Brad, that's my older brother. I feel like, he took me under his wing when he didn't have to. We play a position in the sport where you're the only guy, you know what I mean? And so when you're at that position, a lot of guys tend to want to be that alpha or tend to, just just forget about kind of everybody else or everybody else behind him. But he didn't do that. He took me in under his wing and treated me like a brother. And so I'll forever be grateful for that.
I mean, obviously you started the season, be ready to play whenever. But when you get word that Sam is done for the year, would it be fair to say that this is some kind of switch that goes in your mind, like, okay, now I got to ramp everything up?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like coming into the season, regardless of, the status in front of me, I was just focused on, getting ready as soon as possible, really just to be ready for when my opportunity comes. I didn't know when it would come, but I knew that, if I stayed true to myself, stayed true to my work ethic, that it would come. So really just that, I don't think any of my process has changed. I think it's been the same. Obviously, getting more reps and seeing more things has helped, but as far as my process, it stayed the same.
Knowing that you're going to play in the Sun Bowl, is it kind of easy to be even keel or like really hard not to be excited?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's hard to be even keel. But, I played in big games before, obviously not at this level, but, knowing how to deal with those emotions and knowing, having those conversations with my family, having those conversations with my coaches, it's hard not to be excited, but, I also know how to deal with those emotions and be focused on the opponent at hand.
And look at the geographics of it. Perfect game for somebody from New Mexico, right?
Yeah, it would. I mean, 3.5, 4 hours away from, where I'm from. A lot of family come in, a lot of friends. It's special, but I mean, I can't look at it that way. I'm focused on Duke Blue Devils, and that's it.
Cam, how hard has this journey been to get to this point you're at now? I mean, the knee recovery and to now be in a position to where, you're the backup heading into a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy. I feel like it's just helped me grow into the person I am today. I think a big part of that was just it's a part of my journey. And I feel like, once I understood that, once I went along with that, once I accepted that, it became so much easier because I knew that there were better days coming. I knew that I would get my opportunity, and I just had to stay solid, stay ready through it.
How much have you learned in this past year from both Sam and Jeff and those two looking in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot, really just how to be a leader. At this level, it is a different level of responsibility. I feel like it's easier when you're younger coming up to kind of be the guy. There's not as many guys around you, especially where I'm from, coming from Albuquerque, New Mexico, there's not as many guys that can, come out and produce. And so, naturally you're going to be the leader if you're the guy doing that. But now you come to this level and you're around all the guys who can, all produce and all play at a high level. You just got to sit back and watch, the guys in front of you, Sam and Jeff. I watched how they came to work every day and, just applied those same things to my process.
As a young quarterback in college football, it's an odd dynamic now with transfer portal quarterbacks and being on the younger spectrum. So how do you feel about your position here at ASU and your ability to be developed by Coach Arroyo and Coach Dillingham and have an opportunity to compete here in the future?
Yeah, man, I feel great. I want to be here. I want to be a Sun Devil. I'm excited just to see what has to come, what's in front of me. And, I know that whoever they bring in, whatever happens, I'm always bet on myself. And, regardless of what happens, they're really upfront with me. We're really open. We have that open communication. And so, as long as that, stays true, I stay true to my process, I feel like, that's all I'm focused on.
Coach Arroyo and Coach Dillingham each have their quarterback resumes. I mean, Herbert, Goff, Bo Nix. What's it been like to just pick each of their brains and learn more about the quarterback position?
Yeah, man, it feels great. Coming into the office each day, I'm excited because, it's just two guys to learn from. There's other guys in the room to learn from as well. And so I'm just really excited. I love football. I love just the game. I love everything about it. And so being able to learn more and more each day and just, being able to apply new things to my process and the way I see the game, from a different perspective, it just means all the world. And those guys have, done it at the highest of levels, produced the highest of quarterbacks. And, I'm just excited to see what I can apply and what I can do to better myself, learning from them.
All right, let's go behind Duke lines now for our Know Your Enemy segment. Let's talk to Duke insider Anna Snyder. Here to give us an inside look at ASU's Sun Bowl opponent is Anna Snyder of the Fayetteville Observer. Anna, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing good today. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Eager to see some football at the end of this month, and talking about some good football. Duke claimed its first outright conference title since I believe 1962. What has it meant to the program to capture the ACC championship and kind of bring home that first title in 60 years?
Yeah, you can just tell there's so much excitement around the program and just I would say the senior class as a whole. I mean, they're finishing their Duke career as the winningest senior class in Duke football history, which is pretty awesome. And you can just it was so fun to be there, so cool to be a part of that. And yeah, just a lot of good vibes around the program right now for sure.
So, with all due respect to the Sun Bowl, how is Duke the Duke fan base perhaps respond to this particular bowl game, kind of being the prize for capturing a Power Four conference championship?
I will say I didn't see a ton on Twitter, but some of the things I did see on Twitter from the fans, they definitely weren't the most pleased. I would say. But the team doesn't care. They're just excited to play. And I feel like that's what matters the most, right? But yeah, I would definitely say there probably was a little bit of pushback from the fan base.
Manny Diaz has 17 wins across his first two seasons with Duke, aiming for a second straight 9-win season. What would it would just be, I believe, the second time in school history that that Duke has won 9 games in consecutive seasons. What has kind of enabled him to kind of come in, hit the ground running, and have that success in his first couple of years?
Yeah, I think when you talk to the people at Duke, they really talk about the people and the culture. And I think I touched on the senior class, but I really think it started a lot with them. They talk a lot about their strength training. David Feely, he was the guy that Coach Diaz had worked with previously, but he was at Duke before Coach Diaz came in 2023. I think that's been a big part of it. And just the Duke culture, it really does seem like Coach Diaz kind of just picked up where they left off. And yeah, he's done really well. So that's been cool to see.
Of course, it is one of the facts of the modern college football landscape for bowl season. Are there any notable bowl opt-outs or players deciding to focus on the NFL or the portal that won't be playing on the 31st?
Yes, I can say for sure Duke will be without their starting right tackle and Brian Parker II. He's declared for the draft. He opted out. We did get to talk with Coach Diaz yesterday, and he said Brian Parker II is one of 3 players that hasn't been fully participating in bowl practice. So the other 2 is cornerback Chandler Rivers, who's also announced his intentions for the draft, along with defensive end BJ Anthony. So those will definitely be big misses for Duke, but they've been plagued with injuries this whole season, especially their linebacker group. And, it seems like those guys, they really had that next man up mentality. So I'm sure that we'll be able to see that in the bowl game, even without those key guys.
Looking at some of the folks that'll be on the field there, of course, starting with quarterback Darian Mensa,
Yep.
making the high-profile move over from Tulane and having a really sensational season. What just makes him so effective and such a special player?
Yeah, Darian, it was announced today that he's coming back for his second season with Duke. So that's exciting for them. I think the special thing with him is he has an ability to get the ball downfield. And I feel like when he came in, everyone talked about, oh, his dual threat, dual threat. But he has the ability to get the ball downfield, and he also can make plays when maybe his receivers aren't open. And yeah, I mean, he led the ACC this year passing yards. He set program records. So it's big. It's exciting for them to have him back next year for sure. I can tell you the Duke fan base is very happy about that one.
What are some of the key characteristics of this Duke offense? What are some of the things that they like to do?
Yeah, so this year this is my first year on the Duke beat. So coming in, a lot of the talk was how they really want to emphasize the run game. And they really have done that this year. They brought in a transfer, Anderson Castle. He's a senior. This will just be his 1 year with Duke. But then they have a freshman, Nate Shepard. I think he started 4th on the depth chart, and he moved his way up to number 1, like midway through the season. He's also another one that set program records. So they really have the ability to run the ball, and that's something they did really well the last few games of the season. So they have that, and then you got Darian. I don't know how many receivers he has that have like maybe over 500 yards, but he has a few weapons. His top one is definitely Cooper Barkate. So they got that California connection. So yeah, they got threats all around for sure.
Speaking of Barkay, coming over from Harvard, I believe, with over 1,000 yards, second team All ACC performer. What's allowed him to kind of make that jump, be such an impact player, making that jump up from the FCS?
Yeah, I mean, him and Darian, they've really talked about how good their connection is, and I feel like that you can see. The numbers will speak for itself with that, but I feel like that connection really it shows, and that really is what's allowed him to set himself apart. So it's been cool to watch. There's been so many transfers that have come in on the Duke team this year that have really, like taken over and transformed. So it's been cool to see that, and he's one of them.
Flipping over to the other side of the ball, what does this Duke defense like to do from a schematic perspective?
Yeah, so the defense, I said, this is my first year on the beat, and a lot of the talk coming into this year was the defense. And Coach Diaz has even said at times, the defense isn't performing maybe the way that they have in the past or the way that they've hoped. But, it's a hard-nosed defense. I feel like with every defense, the main goal is stop the run. So that's definitely, where it starts, the line of scrimmage up in the trenches. So that's definitely their main priority, I would say.
When you look at the course of the 2025 season on the defensive side, what are some of the areas that you feel that they performed well, and perhaps some areas that maybe they've struggled or, maybe not been as successful?
Yeah, I know I just spoke about the run. I would say they've definitely struggled against the run this year at times. But it's obviously they finished the season so strong, and that's been better over the past couple games. They struggled at times. They just have, I would say, a younger group, especially in the secondary. They had some younger guys that you could tell were really still trying to get their groove. And I'm sure that's something that will be brought up in the bowl game without Chandler Rivers there at cornerback. But it's a resilient group. I know I touched on the linebackers. They were out. They're one of their starters. Their starting middle linebacker tore his ACL like 4 games into the season. And, they just kind of picked up right where they left off. So they're a resilient group for sure.
Now, obviously, guys like Darian Mensa will, capture a lot of the headlines and a lot of the attention. But maybe who's one guy on each side of the ball, maybe a little under the radar, that you think could be X factors in determining the Sun Bowl outcome?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with defense. I'll say Luke Murgott. He had the game-winning interception against Virginia. So I guess maybe he's not less talked about, but he's one of those guys, linebacker. He just came in and made he just made a spot for himself. He stepped up in the injuries, and he's had a great year. On the offensive side of the ball, that hasn't been talked about a bunch. I guess I'll say Quayshawn Brown. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but he's just a threat all around, especially a receiver, and he's definitely been a difference maker in a lot of games for sure.
ASU's battled the rash of injuries of their own, some opt-outs as well, and as of the time of this recording, some questions about the future of Kenny Dillingham here in Tempe. When we take that into consideration, what kind of advantages do you think that a team going through some of the stuff like that might give Duke in their quest for a 9-win season?
Yeah, I definitely think that could give Duke an advantage. And I think Duke, I don't want to just say a natural advantage, but I feel like riding, the high from the way that they got to the ACC championship game and the way that they won it, I feel like they're just going to look to take that momentum into this game. And that, yeah, definitely with a program that has some uncertainty, it seems like Duke has a lot of certainty right now. So that definitely could give them an advantage.
You spoke of the positive momentum and, obviously the good vibes of capturing a conference championship. What would it mean to the program to, cap off a year like this with a conference championship and a bowl win?
Oh, I think it would just mean so much. And it would just, like you said, it would be the second year with 9 wins. And it would just show that the program is, trending upwards after the down years that they did have. And I think it would just mean so much and just be a great positive way for them to end their year.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk some Duke football. Really appreciate your expertise and insight.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
What was it, Brad, in the old Monty Python skits when they said, like, and now for something completely different, right? Do you remember that? That's not what we're going to be experiencing this postseason in the bowl game for ASU as the Sun Devils head for the 8th time in program history to El Paso's Sun Bowl. This is a game that's got a lot of history. It's one of the oldest bowl games in existence. Even the ones, like the Rose Bowl and others, they have the high tier pageantry and they're remembered as like the granddaddy of them all. Sun Bowl goes back quite a ways as well. And for ASU, it goes back as far as ASU's bowl game history goes, because the Sun Devils' first 2 bowl appearances that they ever had occurred in the Sun Bowl. First, a rousing 0-0 tie against Catholic University. I feel like we need to get whoever ASU's coach was in New Year's Day 1940, get the old Frank Beamer arms in the air on that 0-0 thing. Get that remade. So ASU had that tie to begin their bowl tenure. Then the next year, on January 2nd, 1941, so of course following the 1940 season, ASU lost to Western Reserve 26-13. Sadly, ASU will not have the opportunity to get any revenge against the likes of Catholic University or Western Reserve in this game or at any point in the foreseeable future. I think they still have football teams, but certainly not at the FBS level. Now then, you got to go more than a half century into the future from there until ASU's next Sun Bowl appearance, one that I certainly remember. I believe it was New Year's Eve of 1997 going into 98. 17-7 victory for ASU over Iowa. A lot of us remember that being the game where guys like Michael Martin, Jeremy Stott stood out. But the thing that really stood out was Jason Simmons taking reps at quarterback. Ryan Keeley got hurt. Steve Campbell was in there for a bit. Sun Devil defense really came to play on that day. And I believe Mike Martin, J.R. Redmond had something to say about it as well. From there, things that started to unravel as it got into the 21st century, and ASU started making a lot of appearances in this game. 2004 against Purdue in a really exciting win. I mean, my goodness, that was the Sam Keller to Rudy Burgess show on those screen passes. Amazing stuff there for ASU. Fast forward in a little bit, you got that 2014 matchup with this same Duke team. ASU got a victory there to get 10 wins in back-to-back seasons under Todd Graham. Then you fast forward. That seemed like a high point of the Todd Graham tenure at ASU. You go up just 3 years later, the Todd Graham tenure ended in the Sun Bowl with a loss to NC State. And then most recently, 2019, ASU defeated Florida State in the Sun Bowl. And that Florida State team did not have Kenny Dillingham on its staff. He was at Auburn at that point. I checked into that. So again, this is the 8th all-time appearance for ASU in the Sun Bowl, ties for the second most Sun Bowl appearances by any team for that game. And it is the most frequently played in game by the Sun Devil football program. So once again, a lot of history between the Devils and El Paso, Texas in the postseason.
Yeah, it's one of the historic bowl games, and I think it's one that the town wholly embraces. I think that there's some bowl games where you might talk to the locals and they might not have any idea college football games going on, but I think one of the things that really stands out about the Sun Bowl is that it really just the entire community kind of really it makes this a big time event. Now, of course, it's kind of maybe fallen a little bit in prestige as it's kind of been knocked down the ladder during its Pac-12 and tie-ins. Typically against an ACC opponent there. And we should be noting that this is the 8th and probably the final time because, of course, with the old Pac-12 bowl tie-ins ending after this year, ASU will be in a whole new set of bowl games, going forward in the future. Although I guess, those are contracts that could be renegotiated any time. But, perhaps the ASU could be trading in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl for like maybe the Pop-Tarts Bowl just to stay on the breakfast theme.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that occurs. Because I think there are some Sun Devil fans. I'm not saying they're tired of going to the Sun Bowl. It's the postseason bowl games. You often like some variety, maybe different conferences that you play, different teams, different venues, things like that. But is it going to be one of those deals where you don't know what you got till it's gone years from now? If ASU's not in consideration for the Sun Bowl, our fans going to be like, yeah, I kind of like that game in El Paso there. So yes, ASU will be facing not only an ACC opponent in this game, but the ACC champion, Duke, did so in semi-miraculous fashion, at least compared to preseason expectations and what was expected out of the likes of Miami, Clemson, SMU, that sort of thing. Duke went and won the ACC, their first outright conference championship since 1962. So Sun Devil fans, think about how long it felt between 1996 and 2024, the two outright conference championships that ASU's had, at least the two most recent ones. Think if you had to go more than 30 years further back than that. I mean, my goodness, what a wait for Duke there. You got to give all the credit in the world to Manny Diaz as head coach. He's in his second year. If Duke happens to win this bowl game, they'll win 9 games in back-to-back seasons. In a lot of context, that may not sound like a massive accomplishment, but you got to think for Duke, they've only had one other instance in program history where they've won 9 or more games in back-to-back years. Coincidentally, that included the last time ASU played them in 2014. A lot of us know Duke, very, very prominent basketball school. As of late, in the last decade or 15 years, they've really improved dramatically in football. But a lot of us know them from decades ago as a low tier football program. So for them to be doing what they're doing, including a conference championship that could be capped off by a bowl game victory, incredible stuff for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, really tremendous season and really tremendous couple of seasons for them. In terms of just kind of turning the program around, something that a lot of those prominent basketball schools had, challenges they face in terms of getting their football program on equal footing. But yeah, it is interesting to see how they were able to get into this bowl game as a conference champion. The ACC with their weird tiebreakers, which I believe they've already said they're going to be fixing for next year. They had a big time tiebreaker situation where a 5-loss Duke team gets in over a Miami team that's now playing in the second round of the college football playoff. But hey, good for them. They were able to navigate the path, beat Virginia in a thrilling ACC title game. And I know there was perhaps some disappointments in terms of maybe landing in El Paso after, a win of that prominence. But hey, it's a good football team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And, the trajectory for this program, especially with their star quarterback announcing he's coming back, continues to be up.
And that's what we're going to start with, talking about the personnel. You got to lead off with Darian Mensa at quarterback, transferred in from Tulane, a young quarterback, but extremely efficient and potent. This is one of the better transfer portal additions, I think, that any team across the country has made. For him to do what he's done, he is really, really on a trajectory to not only an incredible college career, but also a big-time NFL payday. Statistically, really, really impressive. Completes nearly 68% of his passes, 3,646 passing yards on the year. So if he has a big, big day, he could get to 4,000 for the year. 30 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. I'll take a 6-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio any day of the week. One thing, I don't know if it's really a knock about him, but it's just something that his game doesn't really include. Not much of a runner, negative 53 net rushing yards on the year. 1 touchdown run. The longest run he's had is 13 yards. But man, when you're just, dotting the I's with the football like he's doing in the pass game, you don't really need to run too much. He has 5 300-yard games on the year. He started the season with a 21-2 touchdown interception ratio across the year's first 8 games. So again, even though he's a younger guy, I believe just a second-year player in terms of being on the field, he's playing like a 7th-year senior, one of the most effective quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. And of course, a guy that's, with coming back, is kind of disappointing for me, being a fan of a quarterback needy team. He's going to be a real high draft pick in that, next NFL draft. And he leads a Duke offense that's very prolific. They're putting up, 34 points a game, extremely explosive. They have 34 plays of 30 plus yards. That's, top 12 mark in the entire country. And so, we'll run down some of the playmakers, but it all starts at that quarterback position, as we know. And Mensa came with a hefty price tag to get him to leave Tulane, I believe in the neighborhood of about $4 million last year, but he's been worth every penny for the folks at Duke.
There you go. And moving to the ground game, Duke has a pair of rushers that each have over 10 total touchdowns. Nate Shepard leading the way, true freshman. He should very well pass 1,000 rushing yards in this game for the season. He's got 962 yards on 178 carries. That's nearly 5.5 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. Also has 35 receptions for 266 yards for another score. A little undersized, but man, he's a true freshman getting it done. Second team all ACC pick this year. Anderson Castle, he transferred in from Appalachian State. 470 rushing yards, but he's got 11 rushing touchdowns. He has a pair of 3 touchdown games this year. So you got more than 20 touchdowns coming out of those 2 running backs. ASU has defended the run very well, but when you have a pair like that to complement the pass game with Mensa and the weapons that we'll break down here in a minute, man, it's a pick your poison thing for the Sun Devil defense.
Yeah, they will be without key cog of their offensive line, which has struggled a little bit. But those running backs have really excelled, as you mentioned. Shepard's a guy who came in as a youngster and kind of rose up the depth charts a little bit. And they have kind of some experience in Castle, and then some of that young dynamic playmaking talent in Shepard as well. And when you have the threat of a quarterback in the aerial attack that Duke brings to the table with Mensa and company, that's going to definitely open things up and keep defenses honest. And ASU, of course, will have the benefit of CJ Fight in this game, as well as some of the other key folks on the defensive line, Jordan Crook at linebacker as well. But still, it's going to be a formidable challenge to slow down the running attack for Duke.
Yeah, and Mensa's favorite target in the pass game has been a fellow transfer, a guy who came over from Harvard, wide receiver Cooper Barkate. Second team all ACC pick this year, 68 catches, 1,069 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's got a trio of 100-yard games and 6 games with at least 80 receiving yards this year. Very, very consistent wide receiver. There are others that can contribute as well. Kayshawn Brown, 668 receiving yards on 54 catches with 3 touchdowns. Samir Hagans, He ties for the team lead with 6 touchdown catches, 37 total receptions. He's also an all-conference performer on special teams, so a difference maker there. And as if that's not enough, they've got a real solid tight end, Jeremiah Hasley, honorable mention all-conference, 34 catches, 404 yards with 5 touchdowns. He also talked about the offensive line. They'll be without Brian Parker, their all-conference, all-America caliber player who is going to be entering the NFL draft. That's going to break a streak. And, man, this is something I learned about ASU last year. And if you look across some conference champions, Duke had the exact same starting offensive line in all 13 games that it's played so far this season. That's going to help you win a conference championship. Remember last year, ASU had a lot of stability and health on the offensive line. So though Parker's not going to play, that's going to cause a shakeup for the first time this year. But if you look at a depth chart and game notes and you see a team without even knowing their record and they've got the same offensive line game in, game out, very likely that's going to be a successful team in my opinion.
Yeah, going back to the wide receivers, I think that's going to be one area where ASU might be struggling mightily, of course, without Keith Abney to shut down a guy like Cooper Barkate, who's been so effective this year. Javen Robinson, Rodney Bimage, of course, likely out with injury. So you're really down to, guys like Joseph Smith and Nyland Green trying to shut down, a very deep and diverse group of pass catchers. I believe, as you mentioned, like 6 guys with 25 or more catches. So you have a kind of that star receiver in Barkate, but also a bunch of other guys you can't take lightly. And, the offensive line could be an area where ASU is able to maybe balance the scales just a little bit, because even with Parker in that lineup and having that continuity, they've relatively struggled. They're just kind of 86 in the country in terms of yards per carry, 86 in terms of sacks allowed, 70th and or 92nd, excuse me, in allowing opponents to make plays in tackles for loss in their backfield 70 times, in fact, this year. So ASU is going to be returning a lot in that, that front 6 of the defense. So we'll see exactly if maybe they can get to Mensa a little bit before he can take advantage of that plethora of wide receivers.
Now, between opt-outs, transfers, and early entries to the NFL draft, as many of us know by now, ASU is going to be without quite a few players in this bowl game. And now it's just specifically talking about the defense, since we talked about the Duke offense. Here are some, traditional starters, and we're not counting necessarily the likes of like Xavier Alford, who's been out for the vast majority of the season, just guys that are kind of recent additions that we, according to the depth chart and what we know, very likely will not see out on the field for ASU. And that's defensive end Clayton Smith, linebacker Keyshawn Elliott. His name is not listed on the depth chart for ASU for this game. Boogie Wilson in the secondary had some injury issues. And then that starting cornerback tandem of Keith Abney, who's headed to the NFL draft, Javen Robinson, who's headed to the transfer portal, along with Rodney Bimage, as he talked about, had that real scary injury late in the season. ASU is going to be without its top 3 cornerbacks on the depth chart right now. You've got Nyland Green and Joseph Smith as your 2 designated starters. The 2 deep goes to Nico Clem and Tony Lewis and Kuba. As far as the reserves at cornerback there, Martell Hughes in line to potentially get a start as well. So on defense, though you do have a fair amount of your starters back, about half of them from what you typically would expect, you don't like to see a lot of guys absent in the secondary against a prolific pass game like Duke's.
Yeah, as mentioned, that's going to be real tough for ASU. So it's going to be real paramount for the that secondary, or the pass rush and the edges, that veteran group of guys that are going to be departing after this game. But one last run in the maroon and gold to get in and collapse that pocket as soon as possible to make life a little bit easier for a guy. I think like Joseph Smith has a tremendous upside. I think he's going to be a key part of ASU's defense in the years to come. But first career start's going to be thrown to the wolves at a necessity. Now, we should say that guys like Keith Abney and Jordan Tyson, guys that are going to be high NFL draft picks, they're still with the team. They're out there in El Paso. And, you don't often see that sometimes, guys. Those high draft picks, they go off and start their NFL draft prep. But this I think really speaks to the culture of guys like Abney and Tyson that are still there, still with the team, and want to be there and see this season through.
Yeah, and for players not to play in these games, I think I'm just personally kind of past the point of judging that, especially in a game such as the Sun Bowl. If you're getting into the playoffs, I think that's a different thing altogether. But if someone's injured, obviously you're not going to have them risk further injuring if they're even able to get out on the field. If they've made the decision to transfer, then there's nothing wrong with them just kind of moving on. And if they want to go to the NFL draft, they're cut out for that. And if they're a prospect that is expected to be picked relatively high, then you don't want to compromise that. So I think that part has been normalized where you just kind of expect in these games. And it can be an opportunity for some young players to get much more action than they have otherwise, and in-depth guys as well. There are a lot of good things about this Duke offense. They rank 20th in the nation in scoring offense, as you mentioned, 34 points a game that they score, 34th nationally in total offense at a little under 415 yards per game. They've got that balanced offense, as we talked about. You could have your top running back for Duke cross 1,000 yards this year. You got 2 running backs with over 10 touchdowns. You got a 1,000-yard receiver already, a very good tight end, and a quarterback who next year very well could be at the really close to the top of the Heisman charts. So again, it's a pick your poison type of thing. Would have been tough for a fully stocked and healthy ASU defense, much less one that is going to be missing about half its typical starters.
And flipping over to the defensive side, you'd figure that, with a head coach like Manny Diaz and his accomplishments throughout his career, that the Duke defense would perhaps, rival what they are able to do offensively. Joe, that's just simply not the case. They've had a rough go of it this year.
Yeah, they really have. They rank 106th in the nation in total defense, allowing a little bit under 410 yards per game. So they're getting 415, allowing 410. So kind of a push there. Tied for 90th in the country in scoring defense at 28.7 points allowed per game. Now then, and we'll go into some individual, talent that'll be in the game for Duke here. One thing that, though Duke shows some weaknesses on defense, one thing that I think can be a great mitigating factor, the Blue Devils are tied for 22nd nationally with 21 forced turnovers. We know how things have gone, especially in these last 2 regular seasons for ASU in terms of coughing up turnovers. So though the Duke Blue Devils are, 90th or 100th or worse in a lot of categories, that can all get washed away if they're able to force several turnovers against ASU, which the last 2 teams have certainly been able to do against the Devils.
One thing that's been a constant throughout Duke's season is big plays, and that's making them and also giving them up. And whether that's turnovers, as you mentioned, they're very proficient in, taking the ball away, but they're also giving up a lot of big plays. They only 3 teams in the country have given up more plays of 20 or more yards than Duke's 69 so far. And talked about the prolific offense that they have. So there's a lot of opportunity, but also risk because ASU's ball security issues have been pronounced in the last couple of weeks of the regular season. And if you're gonna, the quest still there, even though you're going to be playing this Duke team shorthanded, ASU still has the opportunity to get a 9-win season, to get to 20 wins over 2-year span. So facing this defense, even though they have been able to give up a big number of plays, you can't let your foot off the gas and get careless.
Now, there is some talent on this defense, especially up front. Wesley Williams, honorable mention, all ACC, leads all Duke defensive line with 41 tackles, has 8.5 for loss, 2 sacks. The team has 16 quarterback hurries. Aaron Hall, their nose tackle, 3rd team all ACC, 10 tackles for loss on the year. Vincent Anthony Jr., honorable mention, all conference. Team highs at 7.5 sacks and 13 TFLs. Now, he is expected not to play in the game. Williams and Hall, to my knowledge, are expected to play. Cornerback Chandler Rivers, a 2nd-team All-ACC selection in his own right, 59 tackles, 8 PBUs, 2 picks. He's also on that list of players who will be sitting out. So Duke, though ASU has a fairly lengthy list of either opt-outs, transfers, injuries, Duke has some players it'll be without as well.
Yeah, I think that presents some opportunities for ASU's offense under Jeff Sims, and at times we'll see the Cam Dyer packages because I think, of course, not having your top edge guy, a guy who has 13 tackles for loss and nearly 8 sacks, that's going to be big. Although I do think they're still pretty stout up front. The linebackers have been beat up throughout the course of the year, but have been able to step up. But weird as it sounds, it's going to be interesting to see how ASU attacks through the air because I think they without Chandler Rivers, there's a younger secondary can be exploited. We'll see if ASU's wide receiver group without Jordan Tyson is going to be able to make some plays in that capacity because the pass rush for Duke has struggled mightily this year. They do make a lot of tackles for loss. I will say that's probably one of the things that jumps out in terms of the positives when you look at their national ranks. But they're not good on 3rd down. They're not really good against the pass. They're near the bottom of the country in yards per play allowed. Of course, goes along with giving up those big plays. But we'll see if Jeff Sims can end his career full of highs and lows, but end it on a high note.
So as we talked about the Sun Devil defenders that won't be playing this game, let's take a quick look at some of the offensive players. Obviously, we know Sam Levitt is out. That he will not be playing in this game, and in all likelihood, not be playing another game in a Sun Devil uniform in the future. Raleek Brown, not on the depth chart. He declared for the NFL draft. Jordan Tyson, still some physical issues there. Obviously, his draft its stock is sky high. Don't want to compromise that. Shimon Mateer is not listed on the depth chart. Also, left tackle Josh Atkins, who, of course, will enter the transfer portal as well. Right tackle Maxi Hanachor. Neither of them appears to be, in line to be suiting up for this game. So you're going to see the likes of Jalen Clem, Champ Westbrooks as your likely starting pair of offensive tackles. Could that be a look into the future, or at least an opportunity to audition for that? We shall see. Running back, you got Demarius Man Robinson at the top of the depth chart, along with Kanye Udo. We'll see how that shakes out. Kind of similar. I remember when Eno in the Sun Bowl, when Eno Benjamin didn't play, and you had Kyle Williams playing running back, if I'm not mistaken.
AJ Carter, who I believe had fumbled.
He on his first snap, and then they
then it was Kyle Williams' show.
pulled the plug on that one. That's for sure. That was a Willie Hart's pick six. Was he the one who had that? There were some names in that game.
Oh, the 2019. Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was 4 field goals and a pick six and 2-point conversion.
That's right.
Rough game to watch.
Yeah. So we're going to see, some youngsters and some lesser experienced types of players, get some action there. Now, one thing that I think needs to be brought up here is the special teams for Duke, mainly in the return game. We know ASU has had issues on every single special teams facet that exists. So, in the punt return game, Keyshawn Brown, a wide receiver, he only has 116 total punt return yards, but one of them was a 78-yarder that he ran back for a touchdown. Samir Hagens averages over 33 yards on kickoff returns with a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown to his credit. He's a second-team All-ACC special teams returns guy. So ASU, when they're kicking off and punting, got some dangerous guys that are going to be returning the ball for Duke.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup. So let's dive in, Joe, into our 3 keys. For me, I think it's paramount that ASU shortens the game as much as they can with the run. Now, of course, we mentioned they're going to be a little bit depleted in the running back position without their 1,000-yard rusher in Raleek Brown, but I still think that with what you have left in the offensive line, if you have in the quarterback run game, and as well as the running backs that will be playing, you just got to try to shorten the game, dominate the time of possession, and do what you can to keep Mensa and that offense off the field.
First for me, and this is kind of wishful thinking because after the last couple regular season games, though there's obviously been, about a month or so off, you got to eliminate the turnovers. I mean, that was catastrophic against Arizona, and it was still very bad against Colorado. It just helps ASU that Colorado itself was very, very bad. So that game was a victory. In a game like this where you're outmatched in terms of the available players, comparable teams, if you get your fully stocked cover to players, if you're sizing up Duke and ASU, but just these rosters for this game favors Duke. So you have to try to balance that in some way or fashion. And in this game, that has to come by eliminating, not limiting, but eliminating turnovers.
For my second key of the game, ASU just get creative. I mean, you kind of put this is like a bridge game. I view this almost as kind of like a spring game. It's kind of an audition for a lot of the younger players. They've had the benefit of these extra practices, but have some fun, get creative. You have a number of very talented athletes out there. They've spent some hard practice working on some trick plays. We've seen some of them in action so far this year, some not. You're kind of playing with house money at this point. So I'd like to see them have some fun, get creative, and get weird.
I got one that's on like a similar level as that. And it's like play free. It's a similar type of thing. Like a win or loss in this game is not going to get ASU somehow into the college football playoff for this year. You can't get the Territorial Cup back by winning this ball game. But what you can do is you can end the year on a very high note. And I know that you've heard us talk on multiple occasions about how a win here gets you to 9 wins. That gets you 20 over 2 seasons. Might be wondering, what does that really matter? Why do we really care about 20 wins over 2 seasons, or why is that a big deal? Well, 20 wins over 2 seasons would tie the highest amount that ASU's had in any back-to-back years since the mid-1970s. So you got to go back more than 50 years to do better. So that's something that I think is a big time like selling point for the offseason. If you can get a win, even though this game doesn't have a lot on the line, that can just help with public perception. That can help with the thought process among the Sun Devil fans of, hey, things are definitely going in the right direction. I'm not to say that a loss takes that away. I'm just saying a win puts you there. So getting back to the key, you want to play free. You want to have fun. Now, granted, you don't want to play sloppy. And I emphasize that for a team that has had turnover issues, especially the quarterback position. You don't want to be just flinging the ball to any player on the field just to see what can happen. You obviously want to play, with discipline. But those big time goals from the beginning of the season or getting in the Big 12 championship game, all these things that were on the table up until the last game of the season, they're off the table. So I think you can play a little freer than you were before.
My final key is for ASU's defense to kind of exploit a Brian Parkerless offensive line with the pass rush. I mean, the Duke Blue Devils have struggled in keeping kind of the opposing defense out of their own backfield, and ASU still, even with some of the opt outs or like Clayton Smith out after some minor surgery, they're still well equipped to make some plays and make some potentially game changing plays by getting after the quarterback, forcing mistakes, or just in general creating some havoc. And so I think the ASU game plan should be aggressive, dial up some fun stuff, and get after the Mensa and company and attack that offensive line and win those battles in the trenches.
My third key stays with the Sun Devil defense. The secondary, the pass defense, the cornerbacks, all of that needs to step up. It is a really disadvantageous situation for the Sun Devil defense to be without your top three cornerbacks and other defensive backs that are key contributors against a highly talented quarterback like Mensa and all the offensive tools he has at his disposal. So you got to do your best there. And whether you're Nyland Green, Joseph Smith, the safeties, you just have to do what's best to play the most disciplined, focused, effective brand of football that you possibly can. Mensa does have the ability to really, chew people up in the pass game there. So that's going to be a tough task. But if we're talking about what ASU needs to do to be successful in this game, stopping the quarterback, whether that's through the pass rush, whether that's through the pass defense, you have to find some way to slow things down for Duke.
All right, it's time for our game predictions. I'll start it off, and I just hope fans don't take this game like too seriously. Like, I know folks are deeply invested in this program and how this season's gone, the ups, the downs, the obstacles, and the adversity. But I do think that this is a game that I'm personally viewing kind of more as like a spring game in terms of its importance. Like, yes, there is value, there's importance, but I don't think the end result is going to matter too much. Now, a win, of course, you hit, as Joe mentioned, hitting that 20-win mark, that's going to be good. But a loss here, especially against a team that is limited opt-outs, is returning its quarterback, and is really kind of in a better roster personnel shape at the moment than a team playing without that 30, 35 guys. I would say just be prepared not to take it too seriously. Now, that said, I do think ASU is going to come out and give it a good effort. And I'm really excited to see a lot of these young guys in action. I think some of the young guys on that defensive side, some of the wide receivers, some of those guys that perhaps are going to get some carries, and the Demarius Man Robinson types. I'm really going to be excited to see what they do. And of course, Cam Dyer's got a lot of people's attention in terms of what he'll do and how he'll be used in relief of Jeff Sims. But ultimately, I do think that Duke's just in a much better spot. They're returning their all-conference future high NFL draft pick quarterback. All their key weapons are basically back on the offensive side. There are going to be missing some folks on defense, but I just think that it's going to make for a little bit of revenge for Duke in a 31-21 win.
So my sentiments are generally similar, and I'll wholly admit my hypocrisy and double standard here, but just on similar lines with what you just said about how a loss in this game, I truly believe, should be taken with a grain of salt. Number one, ASU is limited in terms of the personnel that's available, and you're going to be without a great deal of your best players. Number two, a great deal of the players that are playing are going to be gone. So it's something that you can't necessarily look at the product on Wednesday if it is not too savory and say, the future sucks for ASU football. You can't say either way because there's just a lot of roster turnover. Now then, where the double standard comes in is, let's say if ASU is able to get that win. Let's say if here's a scenario. Let's say if Jeff Sims goes out and turns the ball over twice in the first quarter. Cam Dyer comes in, leads ASU to a win. That'd be a very interesting thing to take into the offseason. So there certainly are storylines that can make this a very interesting game, but I think that those storylines really only come into the conversation on a good level. I just don't think that there are truly any very, very bad storylines, barring like a major injury to a key player who's supposed to return that could limit the season, like that sort of thing. Barring injuries, there's no real outcome that I think should make Sun Devil fans very upset. But I don't think they should take a win with a grain of salt like they should take a loss with a grain of salt, if that makes sense. Now then, looking into the game itself, it's tough. It's tough when Duke is still going to have a fair amount of players out there. You could think that there would be a lot of opt-outs and that sort of thing, but that's not necessarily the case. They have some, but not a ton. They still got a ton of talent that's going to be out there against ASU. That doesn't really help the Sun Devils' cause. We also know that ASU is just on a real bad run at taking care of the football. I truly hope that this month or so has helped the confidence of Jeff Sims, assuming that he's going to be the guy start to finish against Duke. Hopefully this can be a bit of a fresh start in a sense for him, even though it is an ending for him. Whatever it takes just to shake those yips from the last couple of games that created litany of turnovers. All that said, the Duke offense for me just concerns me. And I'm not sure that their defensive deficiencies by comparison really open the door for ASU to do a great deal here. So I see this being a game that gets away from ASU. They're relatively competitive, but I think just the turnovers and the personnel will be the big issue here. And so I'm seeing the Duke Blue Devils leaving El Paso with a little revenge for 2014 with a 34-17 win over the Sun Devils.
So some recent honors with getting some all-conference recognition. Obviously, you came on back half of that year, really contributed well. What kind of did that mean to you to get that recognition from the conference?
Yeah, it was really a surprise. I had no idea. K1, JT texted me the night before. He was like, "I'm so proud of you," blah, blah, all this stuff. And I was like, what are y'all talking about like this? But they were like, you'll find out tomorrow. But no, yeah, it's just putting in that work, like Coach Hines been telling all of us, like, just putting in work. I mean, good things came out of it. And shoots, that wasn't even like on my any goals this year or anything. Just really just focusing on myself, getting better each day. And like shoots, that was just the outcome of it. So it's just super blessed to have that for sure.
When you look at the course of the season, where do you see that you made the biggest strides? kind of from week one to the end.
Really just understanding my role. So like whenever JT was out there, just trying to get whatever I could. So like 1-2 catches, you don't really know how many you're gonna have in a game with JT. So just being ready for my opportunity, and then when JT was out, unfortunately, but trying to step up, trying to be that guy for Jeff, trying to be that guy. Just trying to make plays. That's what our position is all about. Is just seizing opportunities and shoots. I kind of try and seize every opportunity I can. So just super blessed to have that for sure.
Of course, a lot of adversity what the offense faced this year with all the injuries going on. You mentioned guys stepping up, including yourself. How did you see kind of the offense, maybe the receivers room specifically, just kind of deal with kind of the week in, week out, the ups and downs?
Yeah, it started from off the jump. Like shoots, we haven't had a healthy room all year. Like just like behind us, all the freshmen, they've been hurt all year. Just like Moss goes out week 1, JT goes out like week 6 or 7. So you never you just always have to be ready. Hines tells all of us, just always be ready. You never know when your number's gonna be called. And shoots, like each of us have had opportunities to make plays. Malik had his game against Houston. I had opportunities. Like Turbo had his opportunities. So it just really all of us have to be ready. So I think that's just a testament to Coach Hines, Coach Brady. Just they're working with us for sure.
How does all that progress, those lessons, battling through adversity, how do you feel that sets you up for next year?
I think it's great. I know, you never really know what happens in the future. You can't really control any of that stuff. So I just think it's great. Just put your head down and work. Like that's all. At the end of the day, every single time, work's gonna work. So I think it's just great to be able to come back, get winter workouts, get ready with whoever is going to be at the quarterback helm, so just getting back to work and just starting from the beginning, so it's just a brand new slate. So it's good to come back and work for that for sure.
And we're looking ahead to the bowl game. Duke's defense, they're ACC champion level team. What kind of jumps out to you about the Blue Devils?
Yeah, they create turnovers. They're they said they're top 20 in the nation for creating turnovers. So we have to work. That's something that we're not the best at. So we got to work on that. Not turn the ball over. Defense has to get some turnovers. We just got to play complementary football. Just go out there, just play our football, play our physical football, play with effort. I think we'll be all right.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. We'd like to thank our guest Anna Snyder, Cam Dyer, and Derek Eusebio. The Sun Bowl will kick off on Wednesday, December 31st at high noon Arizona time TV on CBS 5. And make sure you keep with us on the social media side. Follow us on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Facebook, and give me a follow on all things social media at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy42. Be sure to follow our awesome sponsors: Burrito Express, Cactus Sports, DevilsDigest.com, Jones Auto Group, Nice Pest Company, Sun Devil Family Charities, and More Lending. PJ Saturno, NMLS number 257912. More Lending LLC branch, NMLS number 2732146.
And once you're done supporting all of our amazing sponsors, drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I, we will be back next week as we bring you our annual Sun Devil postseason award extravaganza.